Violence, by its very definition, is behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. With violence, various struggles and consequences come along with it, as violence is usually met with more violence, creating a cycle of revenge and hatred that may never end. As expressed by the quote by Brian D. McLaren, "Joyfully celebrating the killing of a killer who joyfully celebrated killing carries an irony that I hope will not be lost on us." Are we learning anything? Or are we simply spinning harder in this cycle of violence? The two films being used in this comparative study are the 2005 South African film Tsotsi, directed by Gavin Hood, and the 1991 American film Boyz-N-the-Hood, directed by John Singleton. The film Tsotsi by Gavin Hood depicts a young South African thug by the name of Sasi that lives on the outskirts of Johannesburg, South Africa, in what are considered the slums. He was portrayed as a cold and heartless individual who would go to extremes in order to make a living and survive financially, even if it meant mugging people and killing people while mugging them. Satsi's whole life is flipped upside down after the discovery of a baby in the backseat of a car that he had stolen, in a classic bad guy turned good film. Boyz-N-the-Hood, released at the height of the gang wars in Los Angeles, is a satirical film focusing on the violence in the daily lives of those living in South Central Los Angeles in 1991 through the coming-of-age stories of the main protagonists, Ricky, Trey, Doughboy, and Chris, as they try to navigate their way through their society that is full of crime, drugs, and violence. Both of the films Sasi and Boyz-N-the-Hood display violence, the struggles that come with violence, and the consequences that come with violence. I believe these two films are appropriate for this comparative study because they both depict the struggles and consequences of violence within the crime and drama film genre through different contextual perspectives through their respective uses of cinematography and other cinematic elements and techniques such as mise-en-scène, motifs, and lighting. There is not much camera movement within the film Tsotsi, as stated by director Gavin Hood. There isn't much camera movement, and when there is a move, it's always dictated by the choreography of the characters in the story. Lance Guer, cinematographer of Tsotsi, captures various emotions and aspects of society regardless of the lack of camera movement. He uses various high-angle shots within Tsotsi, emphasizing the clear disparity between the two different worlds within South Africa, as the audience gets to see the gap between the rich and the poor more clearly through the use of high-angle shots. Lance Guer also uses an establishing shot after the police find the abandoned car in which Tsotsi has stolen, establishing the police's problem, as the high angle of the shot shows the vastness and density of the populated city, juxtaposed to their relative smallness to the city. Charles E. Mills, the cinematographer of Boyz-N-the-Hood, uses a wide variety of camera angles and camera movement within the film. For example, the opening scene of Boyz-N-the-Hood shows a huge diversity of camera angles and movement. This scene starts with an upward shot of a stop sign. There is then a tracking shot which displays the setting of the poor and violent area of South Central Los Angeles. Trey and the other children walk towards a murder scene, followed by a tracking shot that makes the audience feel as if they are following the children, building a sense of suspense. Showcasing how Boyz-N-the-Hood acts as a social commentary, raising awareness on the violence within the society of South Central Los Angeles in 1991, while trying to help create change and promote improvement for the society full of violence, as the movie opens up with the statistic that 1 of every 21 Black American males would be murdered in their lifetime. Most will die at the hands of another black male. Both of the films Boyz-N-the-Hood and Tsotsi use mise-en-scène and motifs in unity to convey the ideas of the directors in the films respectively. A similarity between the two films being the use of mise-en-scène to showcase change and difference between the main protagonists and their respective society. The character Trey within the film Boyz-N-the-Hood dresses more formal than the rest of his peers, which shows how Trey is not a product of his society of drugs, crime, and violence. Also, how he is actively trying to avoid the violence within his society. Sasi at the beginning of the film wore dark colors, which made him blend in with the rest of his friends and the dark and gloomy society in which he lived in. At the end of the film, as he steps out the same subway as he was seen getting off of at the beginning of the film with his gang wearing dark attire, he is seen in white attire, showcasing his change and innocence as he is no longer a product of his society and has become a good person. While both of the films, Tsotsi and Boyz-N-the-Hood, showcase violence along with the struggles and consequences that come with violence, they both differ in the ways that they portray the violence within each respective film. Tsotsi showcases violence through the point of view of a singular male protagonist, Sasi, within his society on the outskirts of Johannesburg, giving the audience insight on the struggles and living conditions within his society. Boyz-N-the-Hood is more of a satirical film, focusing more on the violence in the daily lives of those living in South Central Los Angeles during 1991, while also acting as a social commentary, raising awareness on the crime and violence within the community at the time. This is shown with the common motif of police sirens, gunshots, and helicopters constantly playing within the background of the film, showcasing the violence in society, and that while the main protagonists are surrounded by violence, they are not the source of the violence and aren't individually tied to the violence around them. The character Trey within the film dresses more formal than the rest of his peers, which shows how Trey is not a product of his society of drugs, crime, and violence, and how he is actively trying to avoid the violence within his society. Tsotsi focuses more on the violence and how it affects one specific person, Tsotsi, in his society on the outskirts of Johannesburg, and how a specific event changes his life and causes previous violence to come back and haunt him. For example, a motif used in the film is a snake rattle sound when Tsotsi is following Morris, the homeless man, at the beginning of the film before interrogating him, and Miriam, before convincing her to breastfeed the baby he had found in the car he stole. The snake rattle effect creates a sense of suspense and fear, almost like a predator stalking its prey, as the audience at this point of the film only knows Sasi as a cold-blooded individual, and is unsure of what Sasi would do or how far Sasi would go in terms of his willingness to use violence to get what he wants. This shows how Sasi is violent as an individual, rather than being in a violent society like the protagonist in Boyz-N-the-Hood. Lighting is an essential part of both of the films Tsotsi and Boyz-N-the-Hood, as lighting helps set the mood of each scene within each film. In Tsotsi, high-key lighting was used within the more populated areas within the city. This helps show how busy and active the city is, as it is densely populated, so there's constantly a lot of movement and action. Low-key lighting is used in areas like the train station and the hospital, which helps with the dreary and dreadful moods within those scenes, along with building suspense within the audience with the eerie look of the scene. In an interview with the director of Boyz-N-the-Hood, John Singleton, he states the lighting techniques used within the film, in the quote, "In the film, Boyz-N-the-Hood utilizes the three-point lighting technique. The film takes place mainly outdoors. The light comes from three different directions to provide the characters with a sense of depth and frame, but not dramatic enough to anything deeper than light shadows behind the subject." The use of the three-point lighting technique helps with the feel of realism within the film, which helps with the film acting as a social commentary for the society of South Central Los Angeles in 1991, because it looks and feels as if you are in the society with the main protagonist, helping the audience relate on a personal level to the characters within the film and feel sympathy for those who are living in that society in real life. All things considered, acts of violence have consequences and struggles that come with that violence. The films Tsotsi and Boyz-N-the-Hood showcase violence and the struggles with violence through each respective film. While they both showcase violence and the struggles with violence, they differ in the impact and the display of the violence within the films.